over a campfire. Chapter 3. The Glass Bubble. From the moment she was born, Gregory and Vanessa saw Hannah not just as a daughter, but as an extension of themselves, a reflection of their legacy, their values, and most of all, their need for flawlessness. Gregory, the heir to a multi-generational business empire rooted in real estate and high finance, was a man who believed that every detail, every impression, every decision shaped public perception. Vanessa, a former beauty queen turned high society philanthropist, shared this obsession with presentation and reputation. Their union was not just of love, but of strategy, of aesthetics, influence, and social precision. So when Hannah came into their lives, she was immediately enveloped in a world that gleamed with luxury and strict boundaries. Her nursery was a custom-designed sanctuary curated by European interior designers. Her toys were handcrafted by artisans. Her clothes were tailored miniatures of runway fashion. But beyond the extravagance lay an invisible cage, a set of rules, restrictions, and fears that grew with her. No climbing trees. No eating food not screened by a personal chef. No sleepovers. No crowded parks. Every birthday party was a private, monitored event with a guest list approved months in advance. Every school she attended was vetted for its academic rankings, security protocols, and even the political views of its faculty. And when the world didn't meet the Carlisle standards, they simply moved, again and again, from one exclusive neighborhood to another, from one elite private academy to the next. Each move was billed as an upgrade, but in reality, it was a withdrawal, further insulating Hannah from anything unpredictable, anything imperfect, anything human. To the outside world, Hannah had everything: beauty, grace, impeccable manners, and a future paved with privilege. But beneath her designer smile was a girl who had never fallen off a bike, never argued with a friend, never tasted a street snack. She had been taught to fear messiness, avoid risk, and mistrust spontaneity. While other teenagers learned through scraped knees and awkward firsts, Hannah's life was a perfectly airbrushed portrait, one that came with the silent pressure of never letting the brush slip. She wasn't unhappy, exactly, but she lived on the sidelines of her own life, watching it unfold through glass, admired, envied, untouched. A porcelain doll in a velvet box. Their mansion on Eastwood Lane was more fortress than home. Gated, patrolled, and with cameras at every corner, it stood like a monument to security and opulence, as if daring the world to breach its perfect facade. Towering iron gates adorned with golden family crests opened only after biometric scans or verbal clearance through an intercom monitored by a team of private security. Motion sensors lined the manicured hedges. 2 guards patrolled the perimeter at all times, rotating in shifts to ensure constant surveillance. Even the family dog, a purebred Alsatian named Valor, had been professionally trained not for companionship, but for protection. It was not uncommon for guests, when invited, to whisper that the estate felt more like a luxurious prison than a home. Every hallway gleamed with cold, polished marble. Every vase, sculpture, and piece of furniture was deliberately placed, expensive and untouchable. Everything had its place, and everyone had their boundaries. Hannah's room sat on the 3rd floor, the highest and most secluded level of the mansion. It spanned more square footage than most city apartments, yet it felt oddly contained. Its floor-to-ceiling windows were double-glazed, not just for soundproofing, but to ensure the outside world remained distant. The blackout curtains, lined with UV-resistant fabric, were motorized and rarely opened unless pre-scheduled by household staff. The intention, her parents would say, was to protect her from noise, pollutants, and distractions. But the result was a filtered, muted reality. Outside her windows stretched a private garden, meticulously maintained by horticulturists who imported rare flowers from Italy, Japan, and South Africa. It was lush, colorful, and beautiful, but fenced off. Hannah could see it, even smell the faint traces of jasmine and rose on a breezy day, but she rarely walked in it without supervision. Inside, her bedroom was a study in calm sterility. Every element had been curated to ensure comfort, safety, and serenity. Her sheets were organic Egyptian cotton, triple washed with hypoallergenic detergent. The walls were painted with non-toxic, chemical-free paint in the softest pastel blush, chosen after extensive consultations with wellness experts. The lighting system was custom designed to mimic the circadian rhythm, gently shifting from cool white in the mornings to amber glow by night. Even her bookshelf, an elegant walnut structure spanning one wall, was filled exclusively with approved literature, classic novels with morally upright characters, carefully vetted contemporary fiction, educational material, and biographies of successful women. There were no thrillers, no fantasy stories, no tales of rebellion, heartbreak, or teenage angst. If Hannah ever brought home a book from school or showed interest in a title her parents hadn't pre-approved, it would quietly disappear, often replaced by something more uplifting. Her digital world was no different. Her phone had parental control software so advanced it would have impressed intelligence agencies. Apps were filtered, browsing was monitored, video calls were recorded and archived for security. Social media, to Gregory and Vanessa, was a cesspool of danger wrapped in glitter, and Hannah's accounts were ghost profiles, visible but silent, curated by her mother's PR assistant. And yet, for all the perfection, the silence in the house was deafening. Conversations were often surface level. Laughter was rare. Arguments were rarer. Conflict was considered a failure in image management. Every moment was choreographed. Every word filtered. In that house of marble and glass, Hannah often felt like a delicate artifact, valuable and preserved, but never touched by life itself. One warm, golden afternoon on the manicured lawns of the Carlisle estate. The garden looked like a page torn from a luxury lifestyle magazine. White canopies fluttered gently in the breeze, filtering sunlight over a polished wooden brunch table set with bone china, delicate glassware, and hand-arranged floral centerpieces. The air smelled faintly of lavender and lemon verbena from the nearby hedges. Hannah sat at the far end of the table, her posture perfect, her pale pink sundress ironed to crisp symmetry. Across from her were three familiar faces, Madeline Harrow, Julian Wu, and Judy Willems, all children of families her parents had long deemed suitable company. Their friendship was less about connection and more about shared pedigree. "I think this is tofu," Madeline said, lifting one of the rose-shaped appetizers delicately with her fork. "Except it's lemon-glazed?" Julian leaned forward and squinted at it. "Art you can eat. Fancy, but kind of creepy. Like if tofu went to finishing school." Hannah smiled faintly, though the expression didn't quite reach her eyes. "It's infused with lemongrass and ginger. It's supposed to be cleansing. My mom's nutritionist planned the menu." "You mean, you've never tried just going rogue?" Judy asked, laughing. "Like ordering a burger behind your mom's back? Fries, milkshake, all the good stuff." "I haven't had a burger in years," Hannah admitted, trying to sound indifferent. "I think the last time was at a kid's birthday party when I was 8. My mom said the sodium was through the roof. I got a rash afterward, and that was the end of it." Julian shook his head and leaned back in his chair. "Man, if someone banned me from pizza, I'd have to rebel on principle. Isn't that, like, a basic human right?" Hannah looked down at her plate. "I wouldn't even know where to get one. I've never been to a food court or eaten from a food truck. My parents say street food is unhygienic." A brief silence followed, awkward but revealing. Behind them, near the hedges, a maid hovered discreetly, ready to refill glasses or clear plates, though everyone knew she was also quietly reporting back to Vanessa Carlisle, who stood at a distance pretending to inspect the gardenias while her sharp eyes kept flicking back toward the table. Vanessa Carlisle, dressed in a pristine white blouse and pearl earrings, finally stepped forward, her heels clicking lightly against the flagstone path. "Everyone enjoying themselves?" she asked with a bright but rehearsed smile. "Yes, Mrs. Carlisle." The group chorused almost in unison. A few days later, Madeline had got a new bicycle and decided to come and ride in the big lawn of the Carlisle mansion. The sun filtered softly through the tall sycamore trees, dappling the sprawling green lawn with patches of gold. A rare sense of giddiness bubbled up in Hannah's chest as she gripped the handlebars of the matte blue bicycle Madeline had brought over. It wasn't designer or custom-built. It had a squeaky bell, a tiny rust spot on the chain, and a seat worn from years of use. To Hannah, it looked perfect. "I'm not sure about this," Hannah said, wobbling uncertainly as she straddled the bike. She was dressed in crisp white cotton shorts and a pale blouse, hardly cycling gear. Her hands, manicured and lotion soft, tightened around the grips. "You'll be fine," Madeline said, standing beside her like a proud coach. "Everyone falls at first. You just get back up and try again. That's kind of the whole point." "No helmets?" Hannah asked, glancing around. Madeline grinned. "You're on grass. You'll survive. I promise." It felt rebellious, exhilarating, dangerous in the most innocent way. Hannah pushed off with her foot, wobbled forward about 3 feet, and immediately veered off balance. She let out a yelp as the bike tipped, landing her in a clumsy sprawl on the grass. "Ouch," she muttered, pushing herself up. A stinging sensation bloomed on her knee. She looked down and saw a small scrape, just a little blood, no more than what a child might get climbing a tree. Madeline jogged over. "You okay?" "I think so," Hannah whispered, staring at her knee like it was a revelation. "It actually hurts a little bit." They laughed, and Hannah sat on the grass for a while, feeling the sun on her skin, the sting on her knee, and the rare joy of an unplanned moment. The next morning, everything changed. Hannah stepped out onto the lawn expecting dew and sunshine, but what met her eyes was something entirely different. The entire grass field, acres of soft, living green, was now entirely covered in pale cream outdoor carpeting. It stretched like a giant rug from one end of the yard to the other. Foam padding lined the base. The bike was gone. "Good morning, sweetheart," Vanessa called from the patio, holding a smoothie in one hand, her pearl earrings gleaming in the sun. Hannah blinked. "What happened to the lawn?" Vanessa walked toward her with a fixed smile. "We've had it cushioned. After yesterday's little mishap, your father and I agreed we needed to be more proactive. This will protect you in case of any further falls." "It was just a scrape," Hannah said. Her voice was soft, but something about it felt sharper than usual. "I didn't even need a Band-Aid." "We can't take risks, darling. Imagine if it had been worse. A bruise. Or worse, an infection." Behind them, a maintenance crew was still smoothing out seams in the carpet. The gardener stood off to the side, looking vaguely heartbroken as his flower beds were dismantled to make way for the foam borders. "I like the grass," Hannah said quietly. Vanessa didn't hear her, or maybe she pretended not to. "You'll thank us later," she said, patting her daughter's shoulder. Safety is elegance, and elegance never bleeds. Hannah looked back across the sea of synthetic softness, the perfectly engineered lawn that erased every possibility of risk. The tiny scrape on her knee, now covered with a small, sterile bandage, pulsed gently, a whisper from the real world, the one just outside the gate. From that moment on, they treated the world as if it were an unpredictable enemy waiting to harm their daughter. Every scraped knee, every fever, every hint of emotional discomfort was taken as a personal failure. They vowed she would never feel pain again, not under their watch. And so, Hannah grew up in what her therapist once described as a glass bubble. Except this bubble wasn't fragile. It was thick, fortified, and expensive. She had changed schools 5 times. Each move came when something, or someone, disrupted the illusion of safety. If a teacher was too stern, if a student used foul language within earshot, or if the cafeteria served non-organic food, Hannah's parents intervened. The transitions were always seamless. Each school was more elite, more secure, more polished than the last. The tuition grew steeper, and the uniforms more sophisticated. But with each change, something else shifted inside Hannah, a deeper sense of isolation. Hannah's first school was a prestigious private academy nestled in an old part of the city, with ivy-covered walls and polished mahogany floors. It was the kind of place where children memorized poetry before they could spell algebra. At first, the Carlyles were satisfied. The grounds were secure, the teachers held Ivy League degrees, and the student-to-teacher ratio was delightfully low. But one afternoon, in a routine literature class, a teacher, a bespectacled man named Mr. Calloway, raised his voice when Hannah forgot to annotate a line in a Shakespearean sonnet. It wasn't yelling, not really. Just enough of an edge to jolt her out of her daydream. That evening, Vanessa received an alert from the school app, notifying her that Hannah's mood had dropped to quiet and withdrawn. She called the headmistress the next morning and framed her concern carefully. Phrases like emotional trauma, sensitive temperament, and long-term developmental impact were used. At her second school, more modern, with Scandinavian furniture and a mindfulness garden, Hannah was walking past the lunchroom and overheard two boys swearing about a video game. She hadn't even reacted, but a passing teacher had noticed her expression and logged it into the emotional monitoring system the Carlyles had insisted upon. That night, Gregory Carlyle reviewed the weekly behavioral report like a hedge fund performance sheet. When he read the phrase, exposed to inappropriate language, his lips tightened. The very next day, the family's education consultant was instructed to evaluate healthier social environments. The third school had it all: organic gardens, therapy dogs, and even a nutritionist on staff. But during a surprise parent inspection Vanessa insisted on, she noticed a delivery truck offloading generic, unlabeled frozen food boxes behind the cafeteria. Vanessa didn't need to open the boxes. Her instincts screamed. After an emergency meeting with the school board, the principal explained that they occasionally outsourced certain ingredients due to budget constraints. Vanessa smiled politely, thanked him, and withdrew Hannah immediately. She told her daughter, "Darling, if they can't label what's going in your body, they don't deserve access to your mind." While Hannah was quite sensitive to food, there was a food poisoning incident earlier when Hannah was 5 years old. So this made Hannah's mom even more careful about her food intakes. It was supposed to be a harmless celebration, just a birthday party for one of her classmates at the time, held at a pristine, gated estate only a few blocks from the Carlyles' home. Every guest was pre-approved. The invitation was gold embossed. The caterers were local, but reputable. Vanessa had called ahead to inquire about the food sources, the guest list, and the emergency medical protocol. Still, she hesitated before letting Hannah attend. "Stay close to the staff," Vanessa whispered into Hannah's ear as she smoothed a hand over her daughter's silk dress. "If anything feels off, call me," Gregory added with a tight nod. "And remember, don't eat anything that hasn't been served directly to you. No buffets." But somewhere between the carefully plated hors d'oeuvres and a slice of non-organic chocolate cake, Hannah forgot. The night had been surprisingly fun. Balloon arches, string lights, and polite laughter echoing through marble halls. She danced, sang, played games, and sampled nearly every dish laid out before her. What she didn't know was that she was allergic to honey, peanuts, and, strangely enough, chocolate. Most of the food, designed to appeal to children, included at least one of those ingredients. By midnight, she was curled in the back seat of the Carlisle town car, clutching her stomach, pale and trembling. At home, Vanessa transformed into a flurry of disinfectant, thermometers, and emotionally charged orders. The doctor was summoned before dawn. The diagnosis: mild food poisoning. But for Vanessa, it might as well have been a near-death experience. "I told you to be careful," she said through clenched teeth, her manicured hand pressing a cool cloth to Hannah's forehead. "Do you see what happens when we let chaos in?" Gregory was worse. He paced like a general, barking into his phone at the catering company, threatening lawsuits and media exposure. "This is negligence," he raged. "Do you know who we are?" But the worst part wasn't the stomach cramps or the vomiting. It was the shame that settled into Hannah's chest like a weight. She had disobeyed. She had taken a risk. And this was the cost. From that day on, parties were removed from her calendar. Invites were intercepted before they reached her hands. If anyone asked, the Carlyles had a simple reply: "Hannah prefers quiet evenings at home." And soon, even Hannah started to believe it. The laughter, the cake, the flickering lights of that night faded into a distant memory, filed away as a warning. She told herself she didn't like parties. She didn't like loud music or unpredictable food or spontaneous games. It was easier that way, safer. The fourth school boasted international rankings and a headmaster knighted by a foreign monarchy. It should have been perfect. But one day, the school held a disciplinary assembly to address a series of minor pranks involving toilet paper and shaving cream. Though Hannah wasn't involved, the speech was fiery, filled with warnings and consequences. It made her anxious. Hannah would always come back home and tell her mother about things in school. This time Hannah described the situation and how she felt it was scary. Other parents would have reassured their children and handled this differently than what Vanessa did. The next morning, Vanessa arrived at the school unannounced to speak with the headmaster. She claimed that the tone of the speech had bordered on psychological aggression and threatened to file a formal complaint. A week later, Hannah was gone. Her parents believed emotional safety should never be compromised for crowd control. The fifth school was where Hannah found herself now, older and teetering on the edge of adolescence. She had officially stepped into her teenage years, a phase her mother hoped to delay or soften, but one that arrived nonetheless with all its quiet storms. Though still sheltered in designer cardigans and chauffeured rides, Hannah had begun to change in subtle, undeniable ways. She no longer nodded blindly to every instruction or bowed out of conversations with a polite smile. Now, she questioned, gently at first, then with increasing boldness. Why can't I walk to class by myself? Or does every single friend need a background check? These weren't rebellious outbursts, but they carried the seed of independence her parents had tried to suppress. Her stubbornness began to bloom in small acts, refusing to change her elective despite her mother's disapproval, pushing back when her father tried to pick her science fair topic, or insisting on reading books not found on her curated shelf.